Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We provide fan-oriented and analytic discussions on a variety of animated shows, movies, and anime, including Steven Universe and Gravity Falls. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Mel Moyer.
Hello.
Today, Mel and I are going to be looking back on the 1984, I believe, Hayao Miyazaki film, Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind. All-time animation classic. Not technically a Studio Ghibli movie because it had not been created yet, but is considered one. It was produced by Takahata, directed and written by Miyazaki. So it's all the Ghibli crew there. So we'll classify this under our Ghibli rewatch series. You can find information about this podcast at overlyanimated.com, and you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Okay, so to start, this is the first Miyazaki movie we're getting into on this podcast, and I would like to preface this discussion. I want to preface it, but not bias your opinion, Mel, because of course I have my own opinion, and you're not under any obligation to say you love Nausicaa. But I do want to say that this is one of the Ghibli films which to me is basically untouchable. This starts off a run of films by Miyazaki, going into Castle in the Sky, Totoro, maybe not Kiki's, but Porco Rosso, Mononoke, and Spirited Away. These are what I think are the best films of all time. Not just animation, but film in general. And I just want to clarify my opinion going into this because I'm generally very critical of things. I feel like that makes for a better discussion, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to for this group of Miyazaki films. This is it, right? This is everything in animation. We're going to talk about the influences this film might have had today, and it's just so far reaching. I revere this film and the ones that I listed, and it's just I need to, and I'm nervous about talking about them like this because they're so important and so good, and they're just everything.
Nice.
So yeah, so we're gonna, I don't know, I'm more likely to want to do the more recent ones than these group of classics, but we'll see what type of discussion we can get from Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind. Mel and I both rewatched this film today. If you have not seen Nausicaa, I would say that it's required viewing for a fan of animation. It's a very genre movie, so it's not like it's going to be loved by all. But it is, I would say, more than any other movie in history, this is required viewing. And you'll start to see all the influences if you watch it. Spoilers for this film throughout, of course. But yeah, so let's get into this, Mel. So with Nausicaa, when did you first watch it? Did you watch it dub or subbed? What did you watch it this time? What did you think of it the first time? What do you think of it now?
I first watched it a couple years ago when Dylan made me do the master list of Studio Ghibli films. I watched it dubbed the first time, and this is the first time I watched it since then. I only watched it the one time. This time I watched it subbed. I have to say, I liked it a lot better the second time watching it. Porco Rosso is my favorite, probably, Studio Ghibli film, and I think it still might be. I'd have to rewatch it now to be sure, but I just found myself enjoying this a lot. I don't know if it was the dub or going into it thinking, okay, I had to think about what I wanted to talk about it, but definitely enjoyed it a lot more this time. Got a lot more out of it. Thought it was great. So. My opinion between the two watches has gone up.
Gone up?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually my first time watching this movie subbed. I'm making I've always historically, so basically my early in high school, I kind of went through all the Ghibli movies, life-changing. I watched them all dubbed. Because I feel like that is what you should do in general with Ghibli movies. I mean, this is what Miyazaki says. Miyazaki says you should watch the movies in your own language, and he is the master, and so we should trust him on this. But I wanted to watch them subbed this time, if I hadn't already, to form a fuller opinion for these discussions. And I think the dub of this film is very good. It came out in...
Uma Thurman.
It came out in 2005. I think Disney did the dub. I would assume
they probably did. They've done a few Miyazaki dubs.
Yeah, it was re-released by Disney, originally not by them, I guess. But yeah, the 2005 dub, I would say it's very, very good. Uma Thurman is the most notable voice in there. She brings a lot of interesting quality to Princess Kushana. I don't know if I feel like these recognizable voices in the dubs are you're either gonna love them or hate them. I love Uma Thurman here. Watching subbed, I was impressed by how well the dub replicated like the type of qualities of the character, like Alison Lohman does Nausicaa, and basically the Japanese voice actress for Nausicaa was it was Alison Lohman, basically the Japanese version. Just a very much a young Genki girl, which means like energetic, and that's like a TV trope, which is why you use the Japanese there. But it's look up Genki girl on tvtropes.com. Yeah, so it's a very good dub. Watching it subbed, I honestly don't think there's much of a difference in terms of what you get out of the film because of the fantasy setting. I'm big on watching subs for films that actually take place in Japan because I think you get more of the cultural aspects if you actually watch like in a language where it takes place. But this one is a fantasy world, so I don't think it matters too much, honestly. I was impressed by the sub. Basically, so my thing with Nausicaa is the greatest film of all time. I don't mean the greatest animated film. I mean the greatest film of all time. I've seen Citizen Kane multiple times, and I think Nausicaa is better. Seriously.
Why would you sit through that multiple times?
I don't. Citizen Kane's very good. I've maybe seen it twice, but it's
good from an academic standpoint. I think it's watch it 5 times.
Well, it's interesting. It's a very interesting character study, but like this isn't my favorite film of all time. This is not. If you know my tastes. Giant fantasy epics are not necessarily what I would default go for. I would go for quieter ones, but I'm just so reverential towards this. It started everything, and we're gonna go over what it started. But watching this time, I was less impressed by the climax than I was previously. Whoa. Interesting. I don't know. I remember the climax being the best thing ever, and it was more quiet than I remember, which isn't a bad thing, but it's interesting. Yeah, I think Nausicaa is one of the best characters of all time. One of the most influential, maybe the most influential character ever. I would say that she might be the reason why the current animation industry in Japan is so female-centric with their leads and stuff. It might go back to Nausicaa, and which they pronounce her name differently in the sub, by the way, which I noticed. Nausicaa. It's hard. It's not an English thing, so it's hard to do. But yeah, she's this film. If there are criticisms of it, you can go into how we don't get that too deep into Nausicaa. Maybe she's too perfect. Maybe there's too much going on in the fantasy aspects of it. But to me, it all works incredibly well. This is also the most Miyazaki of the Miyazaki films, and it's the original. So he did direct a film before this, Lupin the Third, which I think I wanna go over with you, Mel, because that's a very genre film and it'd be an interesting one to look at. But this is his first original work. It's based off of a manga Nausicaa. It's based off a manga he wrote and made and stuff, and let's go over the elements of it, I guess. So first of all, the Miyazakian elements. You have the environmentalism. That's the entire film. Yeah. This is the environmentalist film. The twist is that it's all the fault of the humans, of course, and it's an apocalypse because we're terrible to the earth and stuff like that. And Nausicaa is like the goddess of the earth or something like that. She connects with the earth. She connects with these creatures. I would say that the Ohms are the greatest fantasy creature ever made. I think they're incredible. They're just so sweeping and interesting, and we can talk about the mechanics of the Ohms, whether they're sentient or not. It's not clear, I think, from the film. It's at times they definitely seem like it. Like it's like do the Ohms have a hive mind too? That's another interesting topic to get into. The toxic jungle. They call it. I have notes. They call it something differently in the sub from the dub.
They called it like the swamp or something.
The Sea of Decay.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think in the dub they call it the poison jungle. So these are both translations, right? So it's not like the Toxic Jungle they have on Wikipedia. It's not really clear. Ooh, note 1. What is that?
Yeah, I saw that.
Toxic Jungle, Sea of Decay in the film's sub version, Sea of Corruption in the manga translation. They all mean the same thing, but, I guess sea and jungle are not the same. But they are similar. And so, you got the environmentalism, you got the feminism. What strikes me about this rewatch is that this is a very male-dominated world, actually. You have Nausicaa as really... Nausicaa and the princess of the other of the Tolmika peoples as the only like prominent female characters in power. Nausicaa's valley seems very male dominated. So this is Nausicaa seems like a Game of Thrones type fantasy series in which females find power within a male dominated society. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely does it more effectively, I think, than Game of Thrones. Because that was one thing I picked up on too, is like just the plethora of sort of female leaders throughout the film.
Yeah, there's certainly the two, but it's hard to tell what society is in general. I think probably Miyazaki would say it's in a post-apocalyptic world, so there's not a clear of a societal structure, which I think would make sense. But it's not like everyone's female in this film or in any of his films really, but not certainly the main characters and the main antagonist, who whatever you want to call the Uma Thurman character. She's very interesting. Probably one of the best characters in the film. And the feminism, the environmentalism, the planes, the seaplanes. There you go. That's the third one. So this is the Seaplanes movie, and he just keeps doing it over and over in almost every one of his films with these seaplanes. And this is the first instance, I guess, of him including them in his films, and they're very cool here. It's more aircraft than specific seaplanes like we see in Porco Rosso or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the most Miyazaki of the Miyazaki films, some people would say that Princess Mononoke is maybe a better version of Nausicaa, but I would say Nausicaa is first, and it is different because Mononoke is very much not a Miyazakian film. It's like his least version. It's his least himself version of his films. It's very violent and kind of darker, and this is like the prototypical one. So I just, not to say that it's his most prototypical film makes it his best film. This is a hard film to judge critically, I would say. There's a lot happening. It's a very entrenched fantasy movie. This is what I want out of Game of Thrones, basically. Well,
I think it's also very different if you're talking about the fantasy world. I mean, yes, it's societally, I guess, a little bit like Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones, I think, is a little bit too marred down in European medieval, and this is very much not really tied, I think, to any specific culture, which I think is servicing well the sort of post-apocalyptic Mad Max-ish setting, is that there's no really identifying thing, I think, that says it's one specific type of culture that we're trying to emulate here, kind of like when you had an Avatar, it was clearly like an Asian-influenced world. So
yeah, it's definitely not obvious what cultures they're going for. The Wind Valley is the most prominent culture and the most interesting one. It almost seems like dwarves from Lord of the Rings combined with like a European medieval setting. Mm-hmm. That's those are the two that I instantly think of for like they have.
Lord of the Rings did come up as one of the influences on this film, so
they have a lot of short people with beards. Like
yeah, there you go.
They seem like dwarves, honestly, but it's yeah. So this rewatch. I don't know. It's just very hard for me to see it in terms of a good or bad film. I don't necessarily get as much like pure enjoyment out of it as a Porco Rosso. It's impossible to say that this is worse than Porco Rosso, I would say. But
I think they're too different to
they're so
compare
different
them that way.
And this is such a put together movie. It's so it's so compact. Its mythology is so well done. In like last podcast in the Incredibles one, we talked about how a lot of films have difficulty putting their concept into, combining their concept with the rest of the film's plot narrative. This is a film which it's impossible to see the difference, I think. The concept is so ingrained in the narrative that the film establishes, and like the ending of the film, it doesn't pull its punches right away. The twists of the humans were the ones that caused the toxic jungle, and how she's the prophetic figure, and how the come into play at the end. These are things that are very well spread out throughout the film narratively. And it's like the concept is the narrative as opposed to something, something like Inside Out, I would say. Mm-hmm. So what do you think of that?
No, I agree, and I think part of what makes it work is that unlike sort of like The Incredibles or WALL-E, it doesn't have a huge setup in the beginning. Those scenes are great and well put together and beautiful, but I think that is what we decided was kind of like the crippling factor for these Pixar films, is that they start out with these great 10, 20-minute intros setting up world and context, and then the narrative kind of falls after that because they don't really... They don't really pay as much attention to narrative. I think in this, the beginning, with Lord Yupa, I'm not good at pronouncing these things, so I apologize for that. But like this scene where he comes into the town, and then Nausicaa in the jungle, finding the Ohm shell and all that stuff, and it services it so great, because when she goes back out and sees the Ohm attacking, and you get the bit about it being blinded by rage and all that other stuff, just services the rest of the film so well, and it ingrains Nausicaa, her position in the society, the context of everything, and then the narrative and what happens with the plot as it escalates. So I think it's hard to say any one thing makes it work in that way, but if I were to pick a thing that would go on that list, it would be this lack of huge intro.
Yeah, so this film is like a prologue with Lord Yupa discovering another city consumed by the jungle, Mm-hmm. And then that transitions so well into the first scene of the film, introducing Nausicaa exploring the Ohm shell in this part of the jungle. And then Lord Yupa's there, and then that leads into the introduction of the Wind Valley. To me, I'm not as adept with narrative study as you, or at all as you, but this should be taught as how to introduce plot elements in a movie. Mm-hmm. It just stacks so
It's a very cinematic way to introduce plot elements, and maybe that's sort of the problem there against the idea of having a longer intro, is that's more of a literary way to do it. This is just very well crafted as a film and film narrative at the beginning. And throughout, but specifically talking about at the beginning.
This film is very cinematic. It's interesting because Miyazaki did write it as a manga first, and then he kind of adapted that. But I hate using adapting for someone's own thing. Mm-hmm. It's their story idea in the beginning, so it doesn't matter what form it was originally put in, But it's the intro, the establishing, the ending of the climax, all the plot elements combine at the end. And this film, what's so interesting kind of narratively, I think, is how it's the exposition of this film continues into an hour in, even past an hour, we're still getting exposition, and yet the plot is moving at the same time as we're getting more exposition. The entire thing with the ship getting shot down, and them going to which one? The shorter named of the two warring countries, the Pedrites. Them going there, that's all expositionary with about Pedrite and the Pedrite leaders and Shia LaBeouf's family, and he's the voice in the English dub. I do like that we didn't have Shia LaBeouf here. I will say that he's a little distracting, just because we know him so well now as Asbel.
Just do it.
And it's that plot element comes in, and then immediately as we meet them, we get the real driver of the climax, which is the Pedrite's actions. There's just so much going on. Would you agree that this film is still expositioning as we're getting?
Yeah, and that's something I really like, in that sort of you've got these movies, again, like going back to Pixar, where it's like information dump, and then you don't really get too much after that because you're just going off of what you've been told. But this, I think, gives more breadth to the world when an hour in, you're still learning things about the history, about the culture. Because that's the thing with fantasy, is that it doesn't work if the writer themselves don't believe it, or don't take the time to sort of give the information in a natural way that it would happen. Like, yeah, there's that prologue in the beginning where it kind of like tells you what happened with like the 7 years of fire and that sort of thing, but there's no like giant information dump scene. Like, it's littered throughout where you get pieces of this world, and I think that's the way that makes the most sense to an audience member and seems the most natural and the most real when the hardest suspension of disbelief is going to be a complete fantasy world like this. Like, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I just feel like this is so many fantasy films kind of have difficulty with exposition, and this one is just so good with it. It's
very Lord of the Ringsy, I think, in its exposition.
Yeah, I mean, I can't comment too much on that, but you're the master there. Looking at like recent films, I don't know, recent fantasy. We don't get as many like sweeping fantasies these days as we do with like Nausicaa and Lord of the Rings types things. I mean, Harry Potter sweeping fantasy, it's like kind of a genre film and slice of life, like school based, Yeah. This is just pure. It's like a post-apocalyptic one, but that's kind of funny looking at YA novels now, post-apocalyptic ones.
I don't even want to.
Because like this is before any of this nonsense started, right?
Yeah.
So this is just.
Well, that's like when they. Oh gosh, kicking stuff. That's like when they adapted The Giver, and it was like the original post-apocalyptic novel, but it was after all the other ones, so it seemed like.
Yeah.
That was unfortunate.
Did you see the Giver movie?
I did not.
Yeah, it's interesting. We could talk about that at some point. Not on this podcast, but so I don't know. So let's talk the character of Nausicaa. I feel like they pronounce Nausicaa. How do they pronounce it?
It's not. I believe it's a Greek name. It's not even Japanese.
Yeah, it's kind of a sound that's hard.
I think the way they're pronouncing it in the sub is sort of making two languages meet.
Yeah, which is interesting. The dub definitely doesn't do that. I think they just do Nausicaa. Although it's been a little bit since I've seen the dub as well. So I don't know. What do you think of Nausicaa?
I mean, I definitely see her as like a proto for all these other sort of. I'm not as entrenched as like in the right kinds of anime as I should be, but I definitely, from what I've seen, what I've been exposed to, she's definitely sort of the influencing factor on a lot of these female characters. I do think. You brought up the point that she might be a little bit too perfect, and I think that's a simplistic term. I just think her sort of narrative arc relied heavily on what was happening around her, a little bit more than maybe what was going on in her internal world, but at the same time, I don't think it took away from the film at all. That's just, if you want to look at character studies, that's something to pick at.
Look, some people are just actually perfect. That is Nausicaa. No, but it's true. Like, this is not a character film. This is a fantasy plot film, and it's about Nausicaa, but her development is more within the context of the plot, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So since she's the one she's the only one who can stop the home, she has to kind of be great in our eyes. Nausicaa is every anime lead currently. Nausicaa is Aang. Nausicaa is definitely Korra. Watching this film, this is just very clearly Korra on the screen. She's so, I think, influential in terms of these main characters we get. Like, obviously, Korra.
Nausicaa might even be a little bit Buffy.
She might be Buffy too. I don't know how much Miyazaki we didn't watch, but that's very possible. Yeah, not like Korra is certainly from The Legend of Korra, obviously. Much more like hot-headed and stuff like that, but just the way she interacts with everyone and like the big smiles and her energetic interactions with everyone, and the way she interacts with the elements of her world, the environmental elements, it's just all very Nausicaa based, I think. And this can be said of a lot of Miyazaki's characters, female leads. There's a lot that are similar, but none that are the original Nausicaa, and none that are kind of as much this character prototype as she is.
Yeah.
So One quick interesting thing I think we should talk about is how there's a few. I think I've heard there's fan servicey shots of Nausicaa. I've heard people say this, and it's interesting because I'm not sure what context to. It's hard for us to view this in the context of when this film was made. There's one shot of Toto like going down her shirt, and then there's a few from behind up her skirt, right? But basically, I mean, what I think, I don't know what your opinion on this is. I think this is only seen like in terms of, I think this is only sexualized if you view it as current anime type of sexualization behavior.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of arguments and discussion to be had with the idea of like the male gaze, and what it does in cinematography, but I didn't really find it, for that purposes at all. So
yeah, I don't think it was for those purposes. It was not. These were not detailed shots or anything like that. I just think it was very much non-sexualized. At the same time, we do have to consider that it's Miyazaki making the film, and he is a male director, right? Mm-hmm. But still, I think just Nausicaa very. Well, do you think her character is innately like male gaze? So, and what I mean is that it's kind of easy to see her as like this like prophetic figure, and like the like incredibleness of like the female character, femininity or stuff like that. And it's like, would only a male rate this type of character?
Well, that's a multifaceted question.
It's complicated, yeah.
I mean, the idea, so like you're saying, like this sort of prophetic chosen one type character.
It's just like she's so incredible, and it's almost like such an idealistic viewpoint of females and femininity in our culture that I feel like you could make an argument that a female wouldn't view it like that.
I mean, you could, because I feel like a lot of the female writers I've been exposed to, everyone at this point is very focused on sort of like very flawed and complicated female characters, and Nausicaa is not that. So you could view it in that way, where it's like a man wouldn't go that route with a heroic character like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in terms of if I'm gonna make a movie like this, I would like want to like have such an incredible female lead like Nausicaa. Like, I feel like that's very much something from my perspective that would happen.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting just because like what we were talking about with Ratatouille and Incredibles and before, where we're trained to want these stories that are just naturally male stories. I feel like this is one of them that you hear, okay, it's a movie about a post-apocalyptic world. You've got your protagonist who ends up being this sort of prophesized savior at the end of the film. Your automatic thought is going to probably be male, because that's, again, like the stories we've been told, King Arthur, biblical stories, Harry Potter, just all that stuff. It is a very male story. So I think it's very interesting that you would take this sort of very male-coded plot and make it about a female.
Yeah, it certainly is subversive to the American viewpoint of like what this character would be. I guess what I mean is like from like specifically my perspective, right? As like this like hyper feminist like I am, right? So if I was going to make
the guy who teaches the vampire class.
That makes no sense in adult context, but it's just this as like me who's just loves these female characters so much and is much more interested in if I was going to write them or just like consuming media with them, like I feel like from that perspective, which I think Miyazaki is also of, because it makes sense, he almost exclusively writes female leads, that this is very much the character that comes out of this viewpoint. I feel like you could say that Nausicaa is a male feminist created character. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting. I'm not sure if it's true, but I feel like that's
no. I think that's an interesting point.
And it's not that it's bad, but it's possible that it's not. Maybe she's not realistic because she comes from that viewpoint. Mm-hmm. I don't know. So yeah, let's talk other characters, I guess, and come back to Nausicaa, because it is hard to discuss her character in too much depth. She's really just kind of this this really prophetic character who's just in touch with the environment in a way no one else seems to be in the movie, which I think makes sense. I think the movie does a good job convincing you why no one else cares about the environment like she does. Just very entrenched in the world that they're living in and their viewpoints. Asbel, the Wikipedia page lists him second. I would not list him as the second main character, aka Shia LaBeouf. It's interesting.
Actual cannibal.
I actually think one of not here, although he does kill a lot of people. I actually think one of the most interesting facets of Nausicaa's character is how much she embraces Asbel. After her introduction to him is him killing everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's why is Asbel so sympathetic to Nausicaa, you know? I'm not sure. Or it's like this is maybe the best, speaking to the best parts of her character. She actually cares about everyone, like no matter what about them. Potential romance there. Yes, no?
I find I have this thing with Miyazaki movies where I think a lot of them, from what I've been exposed to, have these sort of potential romance stories that don't really happen. So I think it's interesting. Maybe. I mean, I'm not really emotionally attached to the idea of it. So
there's like one beat on each side of it that you could say. You could also argue that this is why Nausicaa is so sympathetic towards him, even though he's like not a great person. It's the the movie kind of does something like that in the epilogue with the credits, but not really. So he spins her around or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not an important thing in the film, and it's not super appealing to me because of how Shia LaBeouf is in this. I'm not super sympathetic towards that character. Princess Kushana of the whatevers. That's Tomikans, yeah. Tomican. I always forget the tribe names or whatever. So this character, she's the Zuko of the story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. She's the Carmilla. She's the Zuko. She's the.
Dylan and I have fundamental differences about anti-heroes versus.
This is one of my favorite.
Or villains turn. That's a dicey topic. Anti-villains versus anti-heroes.
Most people call Zuko an anti-hero during Avatar's run, but
people also misuse the word anti-hero a lot.
Definitely. She's my favorite of this character archetype, though. She's super interesting. It's I guess it's how sympathetically the film kind of like I'm always on board with her, even though she's trying to shoot them within the toxic jungle. It's like no stop, and even though she's trying to bring back ancient evil into the world, she's actually doing a lot of bad things. But
yeah,
but I feel like she's always sympathetic towards the film. I feel like the choice to make her female is essential, kind of, as a foil to Nausicaa, really.
Yeah.
And I feel like how she comes around to Nausicaa is great. How Nausicaa always treats her is great. The part when she removes her armor and she like is missing limbs. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And then she says, the man who becomes my husband will see much worse than this. I thought that was like a dub. I always thought that was just a weird dubbing thing, but no, that's actually the line in the song. That line's very odd.
I have questions, but I also don't.
No, you don't.
Good.
We don't. And I think an essential part of her is her interactions with her underling. I don't remember his name. This guy. His character is interesting. He's kind of the comic relief. It's cool how he's like, okay, maybe now it's time to. I feel like I relate to him because it's like he thinks she dies and it's like, okay, now maybe it's my time to do what I want, and then she comes back and he's like, oh well, and then like defers to her immediately.
Yeah,
that's pretty interesting. His voice, I always remember his voice in I forget who plays him in the dub, but it's kind of distinctive. And I feel like it accurately represented his subbed voice too. And
Mark Hamill was in the sub.
Mark Hamill's in a lot of things.
Mark Hamill is in a lot of things. So is Jodie Benson. And Jeff Bennett.
Yeah. A lot of some overlap here. Lord Yupa, the famed swordsman, Lord Yupa. He has this one incredible scene when he invades the ship when they're trying to, I guess, rescue Nausicaa. There's a lot of stuff that happens on ships concurrently.
Yeah.
And And then he kind of like takes everyone out, and the guy's like, "You're tough." Yeah, that guy's tough. Yeah, that's like the big Lord Yupa thing. I don't know. Obaba, the prototypical prophetic like old woman, right?
Yeah.
Obaba might be the most archetypal character in the film.
It is the supernatural aid of the your favorite topic, the monomyth. Supernatural aid, magical helper, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Gandalf type deal.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't actually do anything, which is kind of interesting. Like, she kind of predicts things. She, like, refers to this old legend, but she's kind of just there talking.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, like, it's a very, like, tropey motif thing where you've got this, like, elder that just knows stuff, or thinks they know stuff, or is imparting wisdom, or what have you. So, not too much to say on it, besides, it's a fantasy movie, and every fantasy movie needs one of those.
Yeah. Tato, the fox squirrel.
The little dude.
So here we have our first obvious Avatar influence, right? Like, Mike and Brian, I don't think ever mentioned Nausicaa specifically. They just say Miyazaki films. The one they mention specifically is Totoro, because that's obviously where Appa's from, Cat Bus in Totoro. But I feel like this film is just Avatar. This is just exactly what Avatar is based off of.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about that in more detail, because it's just every element of Avatar is just from this film, really. So let's start with Tato, the animal hybrids. He's a fox squirrel. Also, Pokemon. Like, this looks like, what, Jolteon or something like that? I think this film is before Pokemon, too, but this is maybe Pokemon influence, too. Tato, what do you think of Tato? Tato's the best, right?
Yeah, he's adorable.
One of my all-time favorite scenes in anything is her, like, meeting and taming Tato. Her letting him bite her.
Yeah.
And just her interactions with, like, animals are so incredible, and that's, like, the best one.
Then he crawls in her hood and hangs out.
And he's just hanging out the whole film.
Yeah.
Most frequent line of dialogue, Tato, by her. Yeah, just all the time. I don't know. I think he's the best animal companion. He's also Momo, obviously. And on Nausicaa's Aang. Let's talk about more Avatar influences. They're the Wind Valley, and they wear orange. And they're kind of this nomadic people. Mm-hmm. So they're actually just the airbenders, yeah. This is where the enemies in this film are ones who want to bring fire into the world. We're shooting. I mean, also, I think a lot of the Korra elements in books 1 and 2 are very much from Nausicaa. I feel like they go back to the well there, with the supernatural elements of book 2 specifically. Basically, the toxic jungle is the spirit world. The insects are the spirits. Nausicaa is the one. Nausicaa, Aang, and Korra is the one that talks to the spirits, right? And is the only one that like kind of understands that they're not harmful, even though a lot of people think they're harmful. So essentially everything is just Avatar. Really, it's the same, and it's great. And I don't know why Mike and Brian don't talk about this more. That's something I would ask them if we get an interview, but
holding breath.
Yeah, we should specifically interview on the Nausicaa influences in Avatar. It's just so much the same. What else do I want to talk about from that? I don't think anything, but yeah, the fox squirrel is. I don't know. Do we see hybrid animals in any of his other films? I think we're gonna have to see this on rewatch.
I mean, I haven't watched them in so long. I can't really.
Yeah, I don't remember either. I'm
inclined to say no, but that could be completely wrong.
I don't know. Random elements of the film I want to talk about. Visually, the toxic jungle is just incredible. Mm-hmm. And the I think visually are incredible as well.
Yeah. A horseshoe crab desert things.
Yeah, just I don't even know what I would call them. There should have been Ohm in. I guess the Ohm's like a lion turtle. I don't know what would be the analog in Avatar. Kind of hard to say.
They don't do much, so it's, I mean, like, sentiently speaking, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't quite say that they're the lion turtle.
So let's talk the Ohm. So I feel like there's... sometimes the Ohm seem like they are not sentient, like they don't have free thoughts, or... No, that's sapiens, free thought. So... right, isn't that sapient? Yeah, so it's like conscious thought, like human sapiens. It's other times they do, like when they stick their little feelers out and they assess Nausicaa and know everything about her and then they react to that based off of what they see.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that they're only responding to sort of like emotional or symbolic imagery elements as opposed to like they're understanding something.
Yeah.
In the way that she understands it.
From us, it seems like they are looking in her past memories and seeing that she saved the baby Ohm that one time, so she's cool. That's what like it seems like to us. That's what the film wants it to seem like, but it could just be that they're like, she's a positive person, you know? There's no like anger or whatever within her. I kind of always got the sense that the Ohm are kind of hive-mindish, because one of them assesses her, and then the rest kind of react accordingly.
Yeah.
What do you think? Yes?
I agree. And I think it makes them kind of interesting. Hive mind.
Yeah. Like, it makes them even more alien, kind of. That's kind of a typical alien characteristic we
have. And like what I think ants have hive mind and that sort of thing, too, in modern-day world, so...
Yeah.
The idea of a collective consciousness kind of freaks me out, so I like it.
Yeah, they are kind of like ants. That's a good comparison. Not the movie Ants, though.
No.
We will not be talking about that one. The soundtrack, this is by Joe Hisaishi.
I forgot how 80s this movie was until...
Is it because of the soundtrack? Is that
it's because the soundtrack and a lot of the sound, like just the sound effects.
The sound design is very old, yeah.
Is super 80s.
I feel like this, to me, I like the sound design, by which I mean like the noises like the gliders make and stuff like that. That it seems like a conscious choice, but at the same time, it was also probably the best they had in the 80s, so... I don't know. I feel like it still works now really well. Yeah. It kind of sets a...
I mean, I think it's part of the tone of the film at this point, so...
and just about the soundtrack, favorite themes, there's kind of the Nausicaa theme, or like the main theme of the film is incredible, and then there's the da 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 da, the flashback one.
That creepy...
Which I think is young Nausicaa singing that, but like they kept it for the dub and they didn't change it, so it's interesting. You don't make that connection when watching the dub because her voice is different, right?
Yeah.
So but it's that's incredible during the flashbacks. The flashbacks to young Nausicaa and the Ohm are visually, like, they kind of go into a different visual style for them, which is a very Ghibli thing to do, and it's just stunning. I think those are some of the best sequences of the film.
Yeah. I agree.
And I think one of the things I noticed this time is that they kind of lay off on the soundtrack for a lot of the film. A lot of it's silent, which I think is interesting. Yeah. Like, it certainly picks up at crucial moments. There's one moment in the film where they kind of go into one theme and then they instantly switch into another one, which is interesting. Also, I feel like the dub, they added stuff. Let's look at this, because I feel like they added more music in the dub. Maybe that's why I'm noticing it now. Or maybe that was a different one. I am not sure.
I haven't watched the dub in years, so...
Yeah, so the thing with the dub is that originally, in like the year after it came out, they released a heavily edited version, which was the worst thing ever, and they like turned it into an action film by editing, and it sucks. And this kind of like caused Miyazaki and Ghibli to never... like give rights to their films again for like over 10 years until Disney kind of finally convinced them to. And then when they're dubbing Mononoke, I guess it was Miramax did this. So on hearing Miramax co-chairman Harvey Weinstein would try to cut Princess Mononoke to make it more marketable, one of Studio Ghibli's producers sent an authentic katana with the simple message, "No cuts." That's like one of the best stories. Yeah. Sending a katana to Harvey Weinstein.
Wow. What a sentence.
Yeah. Pretty great. So then they eventually got this redubbed in 2005, and I'm a big fan of the redub. I feel like maybe it's not this one, maybe it's a different one where they add like a lot of background music and stuff. I feel like that was on the Wikipedia page at some point, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I feel like this is some of Joe Hisaishi's best stuff. He does most of the Miyazaki films, and is pretty incredible. A lot of people big fans of his here. What elements should we? Random things I like. I like I'm just gonna say kind of things I randomly think of. The little girl's going up to her, giving her the nuts before she leaves.
Yeah.
On the thing. That's one of my favorite scenes. Because there's actually not too many female-to-female interactions in this film.
No, I think it's all Kashana and Nausicaa.
Yeah, those are the big ones, of course.
And then that princess who dies for 2 hot seconds.
Oh yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, and then the females on the ship help her. It's interesting that specifically all the females of the Pejai people are the ones that want to help her, because she knew the princess. Yeah.
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 What else can I think of? Some of the creatures from the spirit world, the poison jungle, stand out to me. Like the one long one with like the pincers, which was like gonna kill Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah. Why do you still call him Shia LaBeouf even though you?
I feel like it's I feel like it's easier for us to conceptualize Asbel. Yeah, Asbel. I don't know. I don't think much of Asbel, so I'm gonna call him Shia LaBeouf. I don't know. There's. We haven't discussed the ancient warrior thing.
Yeah, I actually find that interesting.
It's really interesting because it kind of is a disparate plot element, which is just like there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like he's like the post-apocalyptic part of the film, right? Because you kind of maybe he's necessary because you kind of forget about that. But it's. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think it also services the idea of like environmentalism versus industry and that sort of thing. Like you get in the prologue, at least in the subbed version, like it says word for word something like industrial civilization like was destroyed by this like seven days of fire. I think there's a lot of real world comparisons you can make with this thing. A lot of sort of symbolism and imagery it recalls, especially for the 80s, considering what was going on then, like, in the world. So I think it services sort of just a general tone and theme more than the plot itself.
They're very themey. It's not clear whether these are human created or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. It kind of seems more like that they're just ancient evil from even before humans.
Some Lovecraft stuff.
Yeah, and I don't know. He's really cool though. What's great is that they're kind of setting it up the whole film, and then he comes out and he fires 2 things, and then he dies. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I guess that's like the comeuppance for Uma Thurman.
You wanna dance like Uma? Nope, we don't have the rights to that song.
Many references in this podcast, which would not have happened a year ago. Yeah.
No.
Like you talked about Mad Max as well.
Yeah, and by that I meant like Thunderdome / Fury Road. So
yeah, the climax of so the climax of the Ohm's all stampeding and stuff, and then them lifting her up in the golden thing surrounding her, the tentacles of the Ohm. It's just very, I don't know, I find that very cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
And all she does, I don't know, maybe don't remember this perfectly. All she does is like just go stand in front of them. I mean, she saves the little one, and then the little one's the one that ultimately like communicates, which is
hive mind.
More evidence for hive mind. Yeah, that. But if it was like a true hive mind, then they would have known immediately. Once the little one starts to like her, then they would all like her. But eventually, he can communicate with them enough. The film kind of ends abruptly after that, and we just get glimpses of the things that happen after.
Yeah.
What do you think of that narratively? Not much falling action, or none really.
I mean, I'm fine with it. I think sometimes falling action can be like the weakest part of stuff, and it makes it feel too much like you're back, like you realize that you're watching a story instead of just sort of immersing in the world. You're like, oh, no, it's the falling action, it's the cleanup. Here's the piano music montage. Like, I feel like the way it ended abruptly and just getting sort of snippets of what happened after, I prefer a lot more to another 10 minutes of falling action because it's like required.
What film did I say recently that had like too much falling action?
I mean, the one that people cite a lot is Return of the King, because it's got like an extra 25 minutes after they destroy the ring and like rescue Frodo and Sam. Like 8 more things happen, and a lot of people said that was the one flaw with that movie, is that the falling action like took like forever to resolve. So
yeah,
I'd say that's a good example of don't with the falling action.
Oh, I think I said it about one of the ones with Sam, about Tale of Kaguya. Yeah, so this is like the opposite of Kaguya in that it just goes straight ends. I don't know what elements have we not discussed that you thought of when watching?
I mean, we talked about the theming, but I guess what I took out of it and found interesting with the giant like warrior thing, and sort of like how they said that they were helped with the whole destruction, or it was like something from a time around the destruction or what have you. I felt like a lot of this was sort of, especially for it being 1984, was an analog for sort of like not the Cold War, but like the possibility of like nuclear annihilation. I took that, and I don't even know if it was meant to be or not. I feel like it was a little bit, just because of like the mentions of fire and sort of like this barren world and that sort of thing, and just like utter destruction of like society and that sort of thing. I took that out of it, and I found it really interesting, because I love when you've got these like fantasy films like this that tell a story like that from what is essentially supposed to be your own world. So that particular theme, whether it was intended or not, was something I found very interesting.
Yeah, that's not something it's something a lot of people bring up about things that I don't often immediately think of, like this nuclear bomb and stuff. But I think it makes sense for this film, considering the time period, right? This is like during the 80s stuff with, I mean, I guess he wrote the manga, so even late 70s, we're definitely into the Cold War period here. And I think that makes sense. Yeah. So that's kind of seen as like human-built destruction. So that would be so like if we're going to look at it like that, we're going to argue that this is definitely human-caused.
Yeah.
How do you think the environmental themes are? Do you think they're maybe more relative to other Miyazaki films, which also have this environmental message? Is this better or worse than?
I think what makes this interesting is the way that they use like sort of the insects throughout, and kind of not what you'd think of naturally when you think of environmentalism and that sort of thing. People always want to show sort of like the cute aspect of that, and I think it's really interesting here that he went with like, okay, here's the jungle, where a lot of like sort of like wild and scary things live, and there's like all sorts of these like creepy crawly bugs running around, but that's the environmentalism, and these are the creatures like throughout the film, like with the Olm, that you learn to like sort of see in the same light as you might see like, oh, like look at like shots of something like less unnerving to watch, I guess. I thought that was an interesting choice to be with the environmentalism, and sort of promoting environmentalism is showing like not necessarily the pretty parts of nature, but portraying them as very beautiful aspects.
Yeah, I think this film does the environmental themes better than any other film ever, because it's just such an essential part of the plot, and it's also not like obvious from the beginning, because the environment is hostile inherently. That's the entire concept of the film. And then the twist is, no, humans caused the environment to be hostile, and that's the Earth rebelling against this human influence. Yeah. And I feel like it's most analogous to the current situation with the Earth environmentally. Like even today, I'm not sure how much they knew in the 80s about this type of thing, but it's very prophetic, it seems like, from Miyazaki. And it's also just the most well-integrated, the most resonant, I would say, out of all his films. This is the environmental Miyazaki film. even though all of them are. This one especially. Do you think this film is feminist?
I do, on the basis that it just has such a strong female presence and used a female character as its lead and like super like epic fantasy hero type character. I don't think it specifically does anything for feminism, like on a specific ground level, but I think just sort of by nature it's very feminist.
It's like we're not teaching this in feminist classes, but it's I mean, the two important characters in this film are Nausicaa and Kushana, right? And they're both specifically female, and their interactions are the most interesting. The world around them is decently male, and it's interesting how it's kind of not how at least Pedrite society and potentially others come across as male dominated and stuff like that. But certainly, I mean, Nausicaa's just like the feminist lead, so on that aspect alone. So I don't know. These are the elements to me which resonate so much. The cool technology, the third of the Miyazaki themes. I don't know. One thing I thought of is like how fast the Tolmecan ships go down from this like little Shia LaBeouf ship. That's like I had that thought during that. It's like, why is Shia LaBeouf so effective at shooting down Tolmecan airships? I don't know.
I can't tell you.
I guess Shia's just that good, you know?
Shia's just that good. He's gonna go eat them all later.
The ships or the people that he shot down? Okay.
The people. Actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah. And the gunships seem very powerful, yeah, the little ones. And the Tolmecan ship that boards the Pedrite ship too is pretty interesting. Okay, so starting to wrap up, what do you think? What's your response now that we've talked about it, now you watch it and stuff like that, to my little thing in the beginning about how this is like untouchable and stuff? I don't know. How do you see this film? How do you see this film in the context of everything?
I definitely do think it's like up there with like probably like I hazard to say like a certain number in terms of like top 5 or top 10, but it's definitely one of the greatest films I think ever made. I don't think it, and it's interesting because I have this sort of feeling about a lot like fantasy epics like Lord of the Rings. To me, like that collectively is the greatest film ever made. So I feel like this comes very close in terms of like just breadth and style and music and animation and cinematography and all these other elements that work together perfectly. I don't think it's a perfect film, but I do think it's like one of the best films out there. That being said, I still think Porco Rosso is my favorite Miyazaki film, which is a weird sort of like dichotomy to have in my head between those two. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have a lot more respect for it now than I did when I first watched it a few years ago.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, I agree. It's not one of my my absolute favorite either. I'm gonna get to my list here up. I'm gonna pull out the list.
No.
But yeah, it's just so hard for me not to see this as the film for everything, especially like seeing how much Avatar connects to it specifically. Gotta pull up the Porco Rosso. It's I think it's interesting that Porco Rosso is your favorite because you're more likely to like the kind of these fantasy epics than me, I would say.
Yeah.
But Porco Rosso is also kind of a fantasy epic. It's
magical realism.
It's magical realism type thing. I don't know. It's not really a fantasy film, but it kind of has that feel. I don't know, something like that. I have Nausicaa's 2 on my favorites list. I feel like I don't know, will I like Spirited Away better on rewatch? I'm not sure. I think there's an opinion that some people have is that the late 90s, early 2000s ones are more well done and well put together than Nausicaa, so they're better. I think that's not a invalid opinion. Like saying Mononoke is better than Nausicaa, not even favorite, just like better film. It's not invalid. I don't think Mononoke comes together like Nausicaa does. Maybe it has more interesting themes. Maybe it has certainly some different ones, and we'll get into that when we get into Mononoke. But they're kind of like two sides of this fantasy epic Miyazaki coin here, which would be interesting to look into when we get into one. Okay. So yeah, this is yeah. So now we've gotten Nausicaa out of the way, we can get into the other Miyazaki epics, and I feel like it'll be interesting to see how Nausicaa ages. I mean, it's already been 30 years since it, and I feel like it's.
I think animation ages better than live action for sure. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I also think this film's animation is just very good. It's it's very obviously different from Spirited Away in that this is hand drawn and Spirited Away is digital.
Yeah,
it's a very obvious difference.
I still think though at the same time, kind of like what you said for The Incredibles, like this could come out now and I wouldn't just like discredit it or anything.
I think animation wise, if this came out now and we were like, this is the first hand drawn animated film in like 10 years, we could be like, okay. I think sound design wise it's maybe aged a little bit, but yeah, honestly the animation, like, it's interesting to think about how animation hasn't gotten all that much better. I mean, to me the recent
Merida's hair
to me the recent the triumph is maybe on the television side with Korra. Like, to me Korra it's just so much better looking than any other television
I also
series.
do think animation right now is less about a technological advancement and more about sort of like quality and storytelling at this point, when you've got things like Korra and Steven Universe and these now like Pixar getting back into the original scripts instead of like sequels. Is that the big thing right now, I think, is sort of like maturing the storytelling for animation.
Yeah, I mean, I think narratively is why we love it, and like why animation fans love it so much. But I also think Korra is just, it's also like a technical marvel in addition to, just being the incredible series it is. So yeah, it's interesting to think about how maybe on television, animation's improved like significantly recently, but on film it kind of stagnates.
Yeah.
Interesting. But yeah, okay. There we go, Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind. I don't know, last thoughts? Does this make you want to see... Which Miyazaki film does this make you want to see next?
That I haven't seen?
No, just the ones, because you've seen the big ones, so...
I don't know, maybe Spirited Away, I guess. Because I never really had a huge high opinion about that, but a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So it might be interesting to watch that again and see if I changed any, like I did with Nausicaa. But
yeah,
I think I like Nausicaa better as a base anyway. So
yeah, I mean, this makes me want to get into Mononoke because of the fantasy aspect, Spirited Away because those are like the top two and stuff like that. So we'll see when we get to those. So I guess that wraps things up. I'm Dylan Hysen, that's Mel Moyer. Mel, where are you on places?
Twitter at Mel Moy, Tumblr, themelmoy.tumblr.com.
And Dylan OVA on Tumblr, Dylan_OVA on Twitter. And you can find about this podcast, everything about this podcast at overlyanimated.com, patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to our current patrons, Shayna, Cordell, Mitch, Beatrice, and Nate. Hannah, Fever, Mitch, Cordell University, Beatrix, Lestrange, and Nathan Fillion, I guess. We're still debating it. Maybe it's sticking there.
All that Firefly.
Yeah. So I guess I feel like my warning in the beginning was justified because we didn't get into these type of deep discussions that we do for some of the Pixar films. I feel like the Pixar films are more conducive to.
Well, it's like we said here, like Nausicaa isn't as character-centric as something like The Incredibles or Inside Out is, so...
Yeah, it's like not as character-centric, and there's like nothing to societally criticize, so we can get into these big like things. Like it's not like we could go into a huge narrative discussion because of narrative problems, or it's not like it's male-dominated, so we have to go into a big discussion on that. It's just kind of just has everything, so what are we going to talk about too much? I don't know. Good?
Yeah.
There you go. Let me know what you thought of this on Tumblr, Twitter, places. What you think of Nausicaa as a film. I would encourage you to rewatch it. It's it's just such Nausicaa, such brilliance.
Much
et cetera, et
Nausicaa,
cetera.
very
Very wow.
Very wow.
Yeah. Okay, I think that wraps it up. We'll see you guys on the next one. This is coming out Saturday. The next one's Monday.
Question mark?
Oh yeah, Rick and Morty. Okay, so Rick and Morty comes back on that Monday. I think you would like that.
Wait a minute.
What?
I have a question to ask you later.
Okay, well, we'll see what that is in a second. Anyway, thanks guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.